My husband told me to pay off the $200,000 mortgage alone.
I have to send money to my parents, and considering how much they need, paying off the mortgage will make things really difficult for all of us.
Yeah, it really will be difficult for all of us, including your girlfriend, who's siphoning so frickin' much you don't even know what the value of money is anymore. Damn you. My husband's face instantly turned deathly pale, and his breathing became heavy. My name is Linda, and I'm a 32-year-old office woman. My parents passed away early in life, and for this tragic reason, I had to become completely independent financially since I was a college student. Thanks to that, my biggest strength nowadays is the will and the ability to economize. And my hobby, saving money. Such is me, and I've always been confident in my money management skills, and yet someone's managed to cheat me out of so much of my savings. What's more, the person who did this heinous act was the person who I trusted the most. 2 years ago, I had saved $100,000, which was my savings goal, and I was finally able to manage a few apartments, which had been my dream for so long, and which I'd been planning for some time since my goal was drawing near. I was worried that my current office job wouldn't be enough money to send me to a good retirement. So I wanted to own some pieces of property that would be available for rent, while women of my age are working hard on finding that right someone with whom to spend the rest of their lives, and their weddings. I was eager to secure enough money to have more than enough to live decently while not working. That's why I never had any experience with men. I've never been with a man, and I've never been in love with anyone. For me, saving up for a brighter future was more valuable to me than love. But then, everything changed when I met the man of my dreams. That man was Steven, who was my husband once upon a time. He is 5 years older than me, and a wonderful man with such a pure, pleasant smile. I met him at a major real estate when I was looking for a place to buy once I became a full-time employee and saved up enough to start investing in property. He was the clerk who helped me find a good place.
So, you're thinking of buying an apartment to rent out to someone? You're so young, ma'am, and yet seem to know exactly what you're doing.
I've only had to put the pieces together and do what I knew I should to help me in the future. He was so kind to me and listened to what my lonely self wanted to say, and before I knew it, I fell in love with him. Steven had healed my lonely heart and given it something it had craved for so long: companionship.
After this, if you have time, may I ask you out to dinner together, ma'am?
But I've never been out to dinner before. I don't want you to go to any trouble.
I guess so. How about we get takeout, eat in the park?
By all means, that's a great idea. He showed me signs that he was interested in me as well. We started spending more and more time together.
With you, I feel like I can be my natural self. I want to be with you forever.
I want to be with you too, Steven. He eventually proposed to me, which I accepted, and soon thereafter, I married him. Thanks to him, my plans to spend my entire life, my retired life included, alone had completely changed. I was now making plans for a future together. We started looking for a new house. The main reason was because he was living at his parents' home, and I was living in my office's woman's dormitory.
I know it's your life savings, but I think we should use the $100,000 you saved up as the purchase funds for the house, and then we can work together to pay off the loan.
I think that's the best thing to do, honestly. That would take a lot off our plate, and our financial burdens over the course of the years will be a lot less.
We're going to use your savings, which I think is a huge blessing, so I'm going to take care of you for the rest of your life.
I thought I would be on my own for the rest of my life. To know that I could depend on someone else to live at least a good life, as I'd planned, made me feel happy. I went from managing apartments in solitude to buying a home for my husband and I. The cost of the home was $200,000. From my savings, we made a down payment of $100,000. We decided the house would be purchased under my name, and that the rest of the loan would be spent 50-50 between the wife and the husband. The monthly payment of $600 to pay off the loan became $300 each for me and for Steven, and we eventually moved into the home of our dreams. However, as the date of the first payment of $600 approached, my husband told me he couldn't afford it anymore. I don't understand. This is not what we decided.
I'm sorry, but it's my parents. They asked me if I could give them a little more, just for 6 months.
My parent-in-laws took great care of us at the time of our wedding and when we moved up into our new house. My father-in-law, Mr. Knox, the head of a karate dojo, and teaches to the children of the community social etiquette and courtesy through martial art classes. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Knox, owns a craft store where she also offered knitting classes. I thought they were very independent and respectable. That's why I was so surprised. I didn't realize that they also relied on their son to send them some financial support. 6 months, right? All right, I understand. They'll be okay in 6 months, right?
Yeah, they'll be fine. Once the family budget settles down to something more comfortable, I'll pay my share.
I couldn't hold Stephen responsible for his parents' financial situation. It wasn't his fault in any way. And it's only natural a son or a daughter would help their parents out, should they need to. But a part of me was still unhappy with the situation. And the fact that the only option was to take on the mortgage payments myself frustrated me, to be honest. However, based on the nature of my personality, I couldn't let this little occurrence go by without doing something about it officially. If my husband were to dodge the rest of the mortgage and come up with excuses to not pay his fair share of the deal, I was certain that would create a rift in our marriage. We may be husband and wife, but a verbal promise to each other simply isn't enough for me. I'll make sure that we have an official agreement, and I want you to sign a contract that binds us to this deal, okay? I wanted Stephen to reevaluate his qualities and make efforts to save money. That way, he should be able to make his own payments without fail. I also made him promise me that his parents would work hard to try and stabilize the family budget. In the event that even after 6 months, if my husband still couldn't pay his share of the sum, his parent-in-laws would pay the whole he owes in a large sum. This is what I asked to be written down in a contract. In the contract was an undeniable record that he explained my conditions to his parents, and as proof that they understood and accepted the terms and conditions, I had my parent-in-laws write their signatures and stamp the paper with their fingerprints.
Hang on, Linda. Don't you think you're being a bit paranoid? I promised you I'd pay back in 6 months.
This isn't about you, Stephen. Your parents need to restabilize the family budget. Otherwise, the promise you're going to make will not be kept, and I wouldn't be surprised if it never was paid back.
I know, but...
My husband started to complain about my financial personality, but the fact I've been able to save up so much in my age should be more than enough to tell anyone that I'm very particular about how money is spent. The contract, with all my terms and conditions and the deadline for the payback, became important because I wanted Stephen to have a sense of urgency in managing his own finances. From then on, I continued to pay the mortgage for both of us. I ordered to raise my salary, I worked overtime to make ends meet, and I always came home late. That's when I noticed that my husband's life began to change in the strangest of ways. No matter how late I came home, I never failed to cook for myself, and I also did the laundry. But perhaps Stephen was eating out all the time. There was no sign of him ever eating anything at home, let alone cooking anything. What was more, his laundry began to smell like a sweet perfume. I sensed a woman's presence in the shadow of my husband, and I started to suspect he was having an affair. You know, you've been away a lot lately. Sometimes you don't even come home. I know this is going to sound crazy, but you're not, having an affair, are you?
No, of course not. You've always been the only woman for me, Linda. I'm also just trying to do my job to take some of the burden off your shoulders. I go to cabarets because some of my clients do work in those, but I only ever go once in a blue moon.
That's what he told me, but something just didn't seem right. And then 6 months came and went. I tried to get him to pay his share of the mortgage. Why wasn't I surprised he wanted me to extend the deadline by another 6 months? Are you kidding me? No, you promised. And we had a contract.
I saved my money just like I said I would, but I still have to send some to my parents. There's nothing I can really do about it. I don't have a choice.
Well then, I'll talk to your parents. I'll explain to them that they'll have to manage on their own now.
No. You wouldn't understand a child's desire to help his or her parents out. I know you know they feel so sorry about this situation. You don't want to tell them anything, you'll only hurt their feelings.
As we were arguing, the doorbell rang. Speak of the devils themselves. My parent-in-laws were at the door.
What's going on here? We can hear your loud voices from even outside the house.
Oh my God, Linda, my darling. You're crying. What's wrong? Listen to me, Mrs. Knox.
Linda, you shut up and let me handle this. It's nothing, guys. We had a fight is all. We have a few things to talk about right now. That's why you have to go home today.
Stephen frantically rushed to turn his parents away from the house, but being the wise, kind people they are, both of my parent-in-law saw something wrong with us. Instead of leaving immediately, they climbed into the house and went into the living room straight away.
Come here and sit down, both of you. Stephen, my boy, what was all that about you sending money to your parents? Seems to me that whatever it was you were fighting about had something to do with us.
I think so too. I heard the words parents loud and clear, and we became worried we were causing something bad between you two. We were just on our way home from shopping, and we thought we would pay you a visit. But then we noticed Linda acting strange, and I don't think we feel inclined to leave until we understand the real reason why you two were fighting. My husband turned into all colors of the rainbow, from blue to red to green to white. He stayed white for quite a while, obviously, a sign that he was panicking about something. He was definitely not behaving properly. At the insistence of my parent-in-laws, I told them that because of my husband's reminiscence to them, I was the only one who was paying the mortgage. When they listened to everything I had to say, Mr. Knox turned to his son and said,
What does your wife mean when she says you were sending us money? When did you ever do that?
Honey, why are you being such a jerk? You were having a hard time getting your mortgage payments up front, and when you came to us for some help, we gave it to you. Wait, hold on. Stephen, you were getting money from your parents? It came to my attention that not only was my husband not sending his parents any money, but he was receiving money from them so he could quote-unquote pay the mortgage. All eyes turned to my husband, who looked like he was about to shit himself.
No, this is... well...
Stephen was visibly and audibly disturbed. His voice sounded like a bicycle chain that hadn't been oiled in 5 years. In the middle of all this, his cell phone, which he'd left on the table in front of us, rang. Someone was calling him. I saw his face tense up, and I knew it was time I questioned him about all the doubts I had about his infidelity. Are you sure you're not having an affair? Who's on the other end of this phone call?
Don't be fricking ridiculous. That's just a coworker of mine.
He reached for his cell phone on the table, but Mr. Knox caught my husband's hand.
Now wait just a minute, boy. So it's really not a woman, is it? That's a man that's calling you. 100%.
My father-in-law held a firm grip on Stephen's wrist, and since he is a martial arts sensei, Stephen couldn't break free all that easily. My husband turned even paler than I thought was humanly possible. At this point, he looked like a fully sentient snowman. On the screen of this ringing cell phone was the name Dear Gina. Dear Gina?
Now that's suspicious. Winnie dear, put that phone on speaker, if you please.
Your wish is my command, my lord. Mr. Knox, who noticed something amiss with his son, as though he was hiding something important, instructed his wife to answer the phone and put it on speaker. And then things escalated quickly from there. Immediately after Mrs. Knox did what her husband asked her to do, the suspected woman whose name was Gina, the same woman whom my husband was having an affair with, cheerfully blared her voice. Finally, I get a hold of you. Where are you right now? What are you doing?
I'm just at home, Miss Fine. How do you do on this fine day?
What's with that tone of voice, darling? I know you're joking, like you always do when we're together. But this one's just creepy. So, you're home right now, which obviously means that fat bitch of a wife of yours is nearby, huh? You're such a naughty man, Stephen, darling. But that's what I like about you. Gets my motor running. Leave that hag alone, and come over and see me this minute, Mr. Cutie Pie.
Yeah. Yes.
So from what I could understand, this obvious bitch by the name of Gina Vine thought that I, her lover's wife, was in the next room, which was why he was giving these one-worded, polite responses. Perhaps that made her even more excited, because what came next made her sound even more provocative in her speech. Perhaps provocative is too mild a word. I'm positive horny is a more exact match. Hey, don't you want me? I want you to make passionate love to me, just like you did last night. My mother-in-law couldn't take it anymore and snatched my husband's phone away from him. You little parasite, you knew he was married, and yet you were willing to do the unspeakable with him? Don't you feel any shame? Who the hell are you? Stephen, darling, what's going on over there? My mother-in-law never answered either of those questions and immediately hung up the phone. She then proceeded to stare at her son.
No, it's not what you think. It's just some girl I met when my colleagues dragged my ass to a cabaret. It's not like I'm cheating on Linda or anything, honest.
After all this time, and even during this moment of complete hopelessness, I couldn't help but slap my husband for making such a stupid excuse. You're such an asshole! That you were sending money to your parents? That the money became even more demanding? It was all a lie! The truth was that it was just hard work for you to waste your gold coins for another bitch! I'd never gotten angry in front of my husband before, and in that moment, I was beyond angry. I was downright furious. Stephen looked like a skeleton by that point. His skin the color of the Walking Dead, his eyes ready to pop out of their sockets, his limbs and his lips trembling. And what about the contract? Was it really signed by your parents? You lied to me!
No, that was,
Linda, dear, what do you mean by contract? I had Stephen sign a contract of my own concoction, Mrs. Knox. The contents of this contract consisted of the pledge that he would repay me his half of the mortgage in a lump sum when 6 months passed. In the event he couldn't pay it, the contract also stated that I would personally ask my parent-in-laws to pay it. I was under the impression that Stephen had told you everything about it, and that you agreed to the terms and conditions, signed, and stamped your fingerprints. I was sure you did everything. I showed them the agreement. They both agreed that the fingerprints on the document were indeed matched to their actual fingerprints, and they were shocked. Mr. Knox went on to interrogate Stephen. The fact that his voice was ridiculously quiet made it so unsettling.
What's the meaning of all this, son? I never heard any of this stuff from you, and yet our actual fingerprints are on this contract.
My speechless, hesitating husband finally decided to open his mouth.
All this time I was going to make Linda pay the mortgage in full, so I signed it myself, and I got your fingerprints whilst you were sleeping. Wasn't easy too, but the fact you guys are heavy sleepers helped me a bunch. So that's why my finger was red when I woke up a few months back. What the hell were you thinking?
And then, I heard a powerful slap on my husband's cheek that sent echoes across the living room. It was much more forceful than my own slap. The sound was so raw the sheer force of the slap could have knocked out John Cena. It was from my mother-in-law. You're absolutely pathetic. Oh, my dear Linda, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. My mother-in-law was crying and was apologizing to me in such a heart-wrenching way. I felt tears welling up in my own eyes too. The money my son was supposed to pay, we'll pay it in full. Oh, Mrs. Knox. My in-laws were fooled just as badly as I was, if not more. I felt so sorry for them.
Linda, what my son did is beyond anything forgivable. Mark my words, I'll make him pay for his ridiculous mistakes.
And then, he turned to the now sobbing Stephen and said,
Now, Stephen, You're really lucky. I'm a martial arts master, and for that very reason, I'm not going to beat you like your mother did. But from now on, I'm going to take you to the family dojo, and I'm going to give you lessons you'll never, ever forget.
And that's how my husband was dragged by his father back to his parents' home. I later demanded alimony from him and from the woman whom he'd been having an affair with. The identity of this woman was quickly ascertained when Mr. Knox further investigated Stephen. Gina Vine, aka Dear Gina, was a female employee who worked at the same company as my husband. That day, Stephen had a very hard training session, some lessons he'd never, ever forget, at the dojo. And from what I heard from Mr. Knox himself, he couldn't recover until after a few days. I finished the paperwork to sell the property soon thereafter, and told Stephen to hurry up and move his stuff out of the house. He didn't think I'd go that far, and he was terribly shocked.
You sold the house? Oh my god, there's no freaking way! Now where am I gonna go back to?
What made you think you were ever going back to that house? We're getting a divorce now, so if you want to say something to me, you'll have to go through my lawyer. Don't ever contact me again. That's all I did, and then I cut all ties with my husband. My parent-in-laws personally promised me that they would take responsibility for being so soft on him before, and that they were going to make Stephen himself pay all alimony he owed me. After the alimony was paid off, the plan was that they were going to kick him out of their house. In the meantime, Stephen had to go to his father's dojo and receive a special martial arts course to reestablish a basic sense of integrity. The hard training he endures every day will surely make him understand the severity of his crimes, and hopefully, it will give him a better heart. As for the sale of the house, although he didn't get all the money back, we did sell for $150,000, and I used a big portion of the money to pay off the remaining $100,000 in mortgage. The remaining $50,000 was my ex-husband's responsibility to pay, but my parent-in-laws took that over and paid it for me. In the end, there was no gain or loss in my savings, and I was satisfied. And my life was back to square one. Betrayed by a man I trusted left me depressed and broken at first. But then, I thought about it more and more rationally, and then I realized I'm also not a good judge of men. I could have noticed Stephen's ill intentions long before the situation escalated to the scale it did. And I became convinced I was the main cause why this ever happened in the first place. I don't think I'll have to get married for a while, but I also realized that I need to gain some experience in love. For now, though, I'm going to focus all my energy on my job, which is going pretty well, by the way, and I'm going to work hard, keep moving forward in life, and live the best one I could ever ask for. Wish me luck!